All right, so this is what I propose then. What will happen is everybody will have my history, which they will be able to review at any time later after the workshop as well. I will walk with the slides. I will walk people through what the web form shows at for any given image. I will discuss why the entries are such. Then they will be able to look at the image in their history the same way that they would if the image had just been generated. The nice thing about that is the queue time is skipped and the processing time is skipped because the image is already ready. I like that because I was kind of worried what would happen if everybody jumped onto Galaxy at the same time and how long the image would take to queue up. We would then move through these images. And basically what people would be doing is looking at the web forms, learning what the fields do without really entering them. But they could manipulate them if they wanted to, if they were an expert user and they knew what they were doing. And then we would jump to the next history session, which they would have, to talk about the next image. And whatever they did wouldn't change the future state because they would have those elements there.
Absolutely. So, sounds perfect.
What do you think about that approach?
Just a question. Are you aware about rerun option in Galaxy? So if you click on any complete, sorry?
Yes. Yeah, I did. That's how I was actually making these images. What I would have done
users can see your settings.
Is I would, let me, hold on a second, stop sharing. I want to share this other window. Wait. Sorry, Zoom. Wait.
So I think we have a limited time with our facilitators this morning. I think everyone who's coming has already arrived. Okay. Perhaps if we can cover off some of the technical Galaxy aspects afterwards. When
sure, no problem. Okay.
So I think in terms of the balance between handing over to facilitators to run content, I'd be encouraging of as much content as possible to be delivered by you, Martin, because that's who people are here to see. Okay. And the time does always run short for these quick training sessions.
Gotcha. Okay.
So perhaps we can talk about the finer detail of how that will work in the Galaxy interface after with the facilitators log off today's session, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So I think I'll just, now that we are all here, I'll just cover off that we have 7 venues joining us for Monday's training session. They were all thrilled, as much as we were, Martin, that you kindly agreed to to run a training session for us. And they're busy getting the word out now to get individuals to come along on Monday. The facilitators here have all but a couple worked with us before on hybrid training activities, and they're a really diverse bunch. So they have skills in lots of different things that are bioinformatics related. Some of them are biological researchers, some of them are bioinformaticians, some of them are service providers in the bioinformatics space. Some of them are students, some of them are academics. They're people who are interested in training and pulling out training into their venues that are spread all across Australia. We've got luckily only 3 time zones joining us for this event. So we stretch from east to west. Perth's joining us quite early in the morning. So they are all au fait with how the logistics of the event works out. So we call it hybrid training, but it just really means this dispersed group of people getting together on a Zoom meeting. And we think that we've kind of optimized it to maximize the benefits of face-to-face training, as well as getting access to trainers like you into places that you normally wouldn't visit.
That's not true. I sometimes visit Australia. I love that there. So
Have you been to Toowoomba? We've got Toowoomba joining us.
I would love to go. I don't know where that is. I'm sorry, but I would love to go. It sounds fun.
Yeah, but we think it's a really nice community building activity too
Sure.
for people who might feel quite isolated normally or unloved from visitors. We can all get together and see each other and train together. It's really nice. But as we've said, it does limit the amount of stuff we can do in a short amount of time.
Understood. Okay.
But we think that the model's working quite well. So we are so appreciative of you being open to trying it out with us. And
I'm happy to try it out.
That's great.
Absolutely.
So I just wonder, because we do have people who are experts in using Galaxy, we've got quite a few Galaxy Australia staff here with us today. We've got some novices as well. Some people have used Circos, others I think will be relying on that, have looked at the tutorial but nothing else. So if you could kind of give an overview we've got 45 minutes with the facilitators.
Sure.
To what you'll be presenting, so that they can feel confident in their room of people that they're on top of the where you're going with it.
Sure. Let's get into it. So we have 3 hours for the workshop. How many breaks do we have?
That is wherever you need to put a break, we'll do it.
Well, what is naturally and what is productive? I can leave it up to you. I mean, it feels like it's natural to have three or two 10-minute breaks. Is that eating up too much time? 2 times 1.5 hours. Can people cope with 1.5 hours of continuous instruction? And
have one break in the middle?
Yeah.
I would say that is fine.
Okay, so we can go for like 1.5 hours, get to wherever we get, take a 10-minute break, and then keep going until the end. Is that fair?
I think that's a good idea, because if people want to break, they can. If they're falling behind or want to go back to something, they can do that in the 10 minutes as well.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm gonna add that to the slides, just so that at the beginning people know what's happening. What's going to happen is for the first 10 or so slides, I'm just going to briefly talk about Circos, where it's used. I'm going to give a hint of the kinds of things that it can be used for, just give people a flavor for what is possible. Once that's out of the way, I'm going to then walk them through what they will do during the session. Noting that they may not get to the end, okay, depending on how quickly things move, which is fine, because they'll have the history, so they'll be able to get through to the end on their own time if they want to. So essentially, we're going to start with just drawing the chromosomes. We're going to then add some ticks. Are the screens refreshing for everybody? Are you seeing the screen?
No, we're still stuck on your trip today through Circos in Galaxy Australia.
Oh, okay. So there's a bit of a delay, because I'm switching screens. Is it not switching screens for you?
It's not. No. Maybe. No. Okay. Something's happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it switching? Is it switching now?
Yes.
So when I go full screen, it looks like it's not switching.
Yep. Do you want to try that again?
Like, for example, I'm going full screen now.
Martin, that tends not to happen with PowerPoint either. So it may be easier just to click through as you were doing.
So I'm just going to zoom in a bit. Okay. Okay. So we're going to add some ticks. Is it switching now?
Yes.
Okay, guys. So we're going to add some ticks. So each of these images that you're seeing, it has its own history image entry, which is named appropriately for what is being shown. And then associated with that is the object which has created this image, so the form with all the fields filled in. Then we're gonna draw some links. These are segmental duplications. There's a subset of these. These are not all of them. I've just picked a subset because I wanted to keep the processing time short. Then we're going to add a histogram of the number of segmental duplications in 5 megabase windows, so they've been counted. Then we're going to rearrange the tracks slightly to give more space to the histograms. And I will show people how to move things around in the image by changing the form fields, okay? We'll then add another track, which is some copy number variation data, average copy number in 1 megabase windows. And it has a gray background, okay? Then we're going to look at how rules are used in the web forms to change how data are formatted based on things like values and or position. So in this case, for example, you'll see the histogram, large bins are black, all the other bins are gray. And for the copy number plot, positive values are blue, those values close to 0 are gray, and negative ones are red. We'll then look at a couple of other ways of adding plots. You'll see now that there's some squares close to the edge of the image. That is a scatter plot with square glyphs showing just regions of positive, blue, negative, red copy number areas. I have also added rules to make some of the links in the center of the image gray, and the links that come from chromosome 7 are dark, thick black. Then we'll add in another plot on the copy number track that shows the minimum and maximum values at any given 1 meg window. We'll then, a very small change from the previous image, we'll add some cytogenetic bands to the ideograms. And then close to the end, we'll limit the view to only 8 chromosomes, randomly selected, whatever. And then finally, we will use some more rules to remove in-track chromosomal links and make the other links thicker. So it builds up to create this image. Each of these images is a history object. I'm going to talk about briefly the fact that you can get the configuration file out of Galaxy, loaded locally, and run Circos locally if you choose so, which is a nice way of bootstrapping yourself to an image. And I will look at what happens when you download the config files at the end of the workshop. Now, what's going to happen is, given that we may not get to the final image during our 3 hours, but I do want to get to the end, which is the configuration part, what I think I'm going to do is that for the last 15 minutes of the 3 hours, we'll stop wherever we're at, whatever image we're at, and then we'll jump to the configuration section so that people can get a flavor of that, because there's diminishing returns in each additional image, but I think there's good value at the end. I'll then start by just looking at the data formats and what kind of data they will be loading in, or what kind of data they will find in their history, the definition of chromosome lengths, the definition of the cytogenetic band positions and their colors. I am actually not using genes in this example, so I'm going to remove this slide. In the previous version of this presentation, I was using this track, but I'm not, so this will be removed. This slide shows the definition of the segmental duplications, which are regions of the genome with high sequence similarity, larger than a given size. And they'll see that the data file is just a pair of coordinates on each line. Then I will also say that we'll also have a separate data files for the average, the minimum, and maximum copy number value in each 1 meg window in 3 separate files. Normally, this is not encouraged when you're running Circos locally. There's ways to get around it, but I want them to be able to deal with the minimum and maximum values, because there's some tricks that you can use in Circos to show those values. Not I'm going to have to force myself to not talk too much about how different the local installation is from the Galaxy instance, because there are some big differences in how the web form interacts with Circos and what it allows you to do, because I don't want to muddle people's minds too much about, you know, these 2 different parallel universes, one in which Circos is running locally and you have all the features, and the other one is when you're using it through Galaxy and you have access to a subset of the features. We'll jump into use Galaxy. I'll show them the front screen, right? Instead of this create a new history, what I'm going to say is that they can import my history, because I would have exported it. So at this point, they will import my history. They will have access to all my objects. And so they won't need to, this section will be replaced with a walk through the objects that are already in my exploited history, so that they know how to navigate it for the next set of slides. Is that okay so far? Okay, so this will disappear. This will disappear because they'll already have the history imported. This will disappear because this is just showing things that are queued, in process, and finished, because everything will be finished. We will start here. Draw the chromosomes. I'll point to them that if they search for circos, they can go to the circos visualizes that on a circular layout plugin. They get presented with this menu, and then they go to select the reference genome as a karyotype, select their data file, and execute. Now, because they have the history file, they already have the finished image. So basically, they don't need to be doing this. They just need to look at what has already been done by me, which moves us through a little bit quicker. And I can take a little bit more time in talking about different options at this stage. And telling people that if they do want to play around with it, they can, and then they can catch up with everybody with me in the next history object. So then what happens is that if you click execute, it gets queued up, and then it starts running, and then when it's finished, it turns green, and then you can expand that, and then you can either look at the image with the eyeball or download it with the floppy disk, and then you get that. So that basically draws the very basic image. The chromosomes are colored by the kind of UCSC genome browser convention, and there's some labels. Then you can name your image if you like. I'm showing them how to do that. They've already been renamed, so they're not all called circos plots. They're called something like karyotype. Then you could save that tag, and that image will be renamed. So now I'm going to talk about building up the images by rerunning the previous job with the little loopy arrows, and that a lot takes us back to the form. Going to the ticks, for example, I will talk about tick groups and how you can define that I want ticks with no labels every 10 megs and ticks with labels every 20 megs, something like that. Walk them through the menu for the tick groups and talk about how the tick groups work. We'll create a second tick group. This one is every 10 megs, and then we get an image with ticks. Great, so we can build that up. At this point, I might talk about the need for changing your tick groups depending on how big your ideograms are and how many ticks you want, and to avoid having too many ticks, because nobody really needs to see a tick every meg when you cannot distinguish them because they are so small. Here I'm renaming that image again, karyotype text. I may replace this slide or completely delete it, given that I now know that I'll be exporting my history and how to do that. The first time we draw data, we'll draw segmental duplication. So we'll go to the link track option. We'll drop in the data file. For the links, we'll select some features, and then we get some links. We'll add a histogram of segmental duplications. We'll go to the 2D data tracks. We'll select the histogram. We'll select the outside and inside radius, and so on. Now, at this point, Gareth, why does my histogram data source, and for other sources as well, sometimes say unavailable?
Yeah, Martin,
and sometimes
really good.
It doesn't. What does that mean, unavailable?
So Galaxy on import of your files tries to guess the file type, and by and large it does an excellent job, and it does an excellent job when it's a complicated file type like a FASTQ or a bed file or something like that. It's a little closer to a toss of a coin where it's something like a structured text file, which could be reinterpreted as a bed file. And then it's the wrapper that has been built for Circus is looking for a particular file type.
Got it. So unavailable basically means I couldn't figure out the format.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Okay,
so
that's fine. I'll just mention that to people.
Well, what we can do in your history that you'll share is you and I can work to force all the file types to be the correct one. And that will only take a couple of minutes.
Okay, it's sure, no problem. So I'll make a note of that, and then we will get a histogram, and then I'll talk about how, well, you see how the tracks are really close together. You can't really quite see them as separate. The histograms kind of look like big ends on links. So we're going to adjust the track positions, go back into our form, adjust the radius of the start and the end of the track so that there's a little bit more space between them. I will then briefly mention that there's a bunch of Circos wrappers around certain tools that can be used to do something like count the number of links in a 5 meg window or in a 10 meg window and create a file that can be used as a histogram, so that you could do some aggregate manipulation of the data, which Circos normally would not do by itself. You have to call another script. So I will show them that if you search for Circos and go to the link density track, reduce links to a density plot, you could, if you'd like to, select your bin size, 5 megs, paste in your link file, and then what you would get is you would get a density track, which essentially be the count of the number of links that terminate within a window on each chromosome. If you wanted to do that, but I would have provided that data set for them, which was basically generated with this tool. So that's just as an aside, and that there are other wrappers here to do things like resample the data, because Circos does no resampling on its own. It really just draws things. It doesn't analyze data. It doesn't resample window or do anything like that. We'll add a scatter plot of copy number variation. So we'll insert a data plot. This will be our second 2D data plot with the average copy number variation, which I pulled down from that data set, is pulled down from that tutorial that I guess you sent out to people already. And then we'll talk about how to constrain the histogram display to the minimum and maximum value. Any other values outside of this range will be shown at the edge of the histogram or at the maximum. So it won't be clipped, it'll be pushed to the maximum. We'll set a background color, a light gray background color. And I've purposely drawn this scatter plot on top of the histogram to show that tracks can be drawn on top of each other, and Circos will not tell you that you're overlapping or you're drawing on top of something that you've already drawn. It's a powerful feature because you can then layer things, but it also will not prevent you from making a mistake and drawing things to cover other things, which you probably don't want to do. So we're going to go back and readjust the position of the links and the histogram and the copy number, a scatter plot to have non-overlapping radii ranges. And when we do that, you see that they don't overlap anymore, and you're free to adjust them to be placed anywhere within the image. I'll talk about that personally. I like it when there's a little bit of space between there. I might talk about what these numbers mean. Actually, I should talk about that these numbers are relative to the radius of the circle, regardless what the ultimate resolution of the image is. So I kind of feel like at this point, this is a nice natural end of the first part because we would have drawn some data, moved some of the tracks around, and now we're going to be changing how these data are displayed. So do we have a time for questions? Is there a natural, you said it was going to be a Google Doc? Christina?
Yep. So we, just because we sometimes have a whole lot of participants who might want to ask questions at once, and because we also have dispersed expertise around the venues, we have a live document where everyone can jump on and have a conversation, ask questions.
Okay, great.
And so I think I will sit in a room with you, Martin, and keep an eye on that document. So if anything urgent comes up, I will send you the signal to address the question. But the facilitators also, if they feel able to, can carry on the conversation in the Google Doc.
And the students will know what the URL of that shared document is?
Yes. Yeah. So
Okay, and I don't need to put that on my slides.
no, but I can send it to you if you'd like to. So
I don't need to. If I don't have to put it on the slides,
yep.
I don't need to do it, because it's not like anybody's going to type it in, presumably, unless it's like a shortened link. But what I was thinking is that slide 94 feels like a natural time to look at this document and cover any questions that weren't urgent that you would have stopped me for before this time.
Perfect.
Okay, so at this point, at slide 94, we're just gonna look, I'm gonna look to you, we're gonna look at the questions and cover things up to now.
We call it the discussion board. So we'll go over to the discussion board together.
So I'm gonna add a slide here that says, you know, we're covering questions. Okay, we're gonna move on. So the rules are really, really powerful, because what they allow you to do, much like style sheets in HTML, people are familiar with those, is change the visibility and formatting of things based on content and meaning, as opposed to any kind of hard-coded things in the rules. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the link count histograms, we're going to make it all gray, and any values that are bigger than 20, we're going to make black. So we're going to look at, going to change the color of the histogram to gray, and change the stroke thickness to 0. And then here in the rules section, we're going to insert a condition. That condition will be based on value. Anything above this value, which is 20, we're going to insert an action to apply to those data points. And that will change the fill color for all of those points that meet that condition, and the color will be black. Pretty straightforward. And now you see that any histogram value bigger than 20, I just picked that completely arbitrarily. You know, large, at least for this data set, they're black. Obviously, all of these rules and all of these specific cutoffs, you would have to select based on your understanding of your data set, whatever it may be. We'll then look at the copy number, variation, scatter plot. We'll make all the values gray, and then anything less than minus 0.15 will be red. Anything bigger than 0.15 will be blue. And so we'll do the same thing for the 2D scatter plot. We will look at the rule, we'll create a rule. It'll be based on a point value. Anything less than minus 0.15 will be selected a color red. The next rule will be anything that is bigger than 0.15 will be blue. And that's it. Gareth, I noted that I got an error, and I think there's something weird with the wrapper. If the value cutoff was 0, I think if I put something like, I want all points bigger than 0 to be something, the wrapper barfs, because I think it's testing whether that field is non-zero with some kind of a Boolean test for which the actual digit 0 fails, and then it's creating a rule without a condition. And so I think it's some kind of a bug in how it's handling that field. So I don't know if 0.0 works. I didn't test it. So I just thought, okay, well, instead of trying to, you know, find a hack around it, I'm just going to pick a value like minus 0.15 and 0.15, because I'm going to assume that anything be in that range, small value range, is not interesting to me. So the goal of this rule is to highlight values that are of interest to me. And that value interest cutoff might be 0.5, might be 0.75, whatever. What we're going to do now is, so far it's kind of pretty straightforward. What we're going to do now is a little bit Circo-C. So it's not a trick, but it is a strategy to reuse a data file in another track to show a different aspect of that data. Now, because the wrapper, and this is just for the facilitators because I don't really want to get into the differences between the wrapper and the local installation, but because the wrapper doesn't let me do certain things, the way I'm going to do this is slightly unnatural, but it doesn't matter, okay? I would do it in a slightly different way with a local installation. What I will do is I will create a separate scatter plot where I will only show the positive and negative values. So I will make one scatter plot that only the positive values are shown, and I will make a separate scatter plot where only the negative values are shown. But there's a The trick here is that I'm going to use a square glyph, and I'm going to constrain the scatter plot to a single radial position. In other words, all the points will be in one spot. And what will that look like? Let's look. The outside radius and the inside radius are both 82% relative of the circumference of the circle. What that means is, regardless what the value of this data point is, it's going to be placed in the same position. It's going to be a rectangle, it's going to be red, and here, anything that is above minus 0.15, so all the positive values and those close to 0, will have their visibility changed to no, meaning they will not be shown. And then I will make another plot at 97%, which basically does the same thing for the positive values. Rectangles are going to be blue, and anything below 0.15, all the negative stuff, will not be shown. And then the result is this. What you're seeing is you're essentially seeing a compressed scatter plot where now the Y value is irrelevant, but a point is placed in all the positions where the values are bigger than 0.15, and that's the blue area you see. And then the red squares are all the areas that are negative, where the values are less than minus 0.15. This redundantly encodes what is shown in the scatter plot, yes. However, I'm trying to show different ways of showing the same data and how you can mix and match them. And the important takeaway point here is that you can reuse a data file for different tracks, and you use the visibility toggle to change which data points you want to show. I will then change some of the radial positions of the tracks to create something that looks like that. So basically what I've done is I've pushed the two square glyph scatter plots out towards the edge so that they're closer to the ideograms, and also importantly close to each other. So you can quickly scan around and find areas where, oh, in this area there's, because it's a window of 1 meg, there's both regions that are less than minus 0.15 and bigger than 0.15. I will also now apply rules to the links. So all the links will be 20% opaque gray, and links to and from chromosome 7 will be thick black and drawn on top. I'll work through changing the transparency. And then this is kind of like a complicated rule set. Again, the text is small. However, people will be able to see that in their history object, that the rule is for anything that's on chromosome either side HS7 will become black, thick, and the Z depth, which is the vertical or the in and out of the screen position at which it's drawn, will be larger, which means it will be drawn on top of the other links, because the average, the default value, Z value for everything is 0, and anything with a bigger Z value is drawn after anything with a smaller Z value. So you get this kind of effect where all the black links are drawn on top of all the other links, and all the other links, as we said, were going to be gray and slightly transparent. And then I'll work through overlaying a histogram. I'm just going to jump through to this. What it'll do is it takes a separate data file of the min and max values in 1 meg windows, and it puts it on top of the scatter plot of the copy number values. So what I've done here is I've purposefully placed a track in the same position as another track. I've made the colors of that track that I'm placing transparent so that the stuff underneath will show through. And the reason why I'm showing min and max is because by showing the average, I really still don't know what the fluctuation, what the variability of the copy number is within that window. So by showing the min and max, I can get a sense of what that is. This could be 90%, this doesn't have to be min and max, maybe that's a little extreme. I could have used, you know, first quartile, third quartile, I could have used 90%, 10% percentile, 90th percentile, or some other thing. This is a good way of showing both the variability in the information together with the average, and then that scatter plot with the square glyphs shows you, applies some cutoff that's meaningful to you, let's say 0.15 minus 0.15, to show regions of interest that you should be paying attention to. And then we're going to add the karyotype cytogenetic bands to the ideograms by clicking on the ideogram menu and then paste using the file which just defines the bands. I was having some issues. You guys, I think, updated your Galaxy version. It's now Galaxy 4. I think before it was 2, before the downtime. And I was having some issue. It wasn't, I was pasting in a karyotype which already had the band definitions and it wasn't showing the bands. So I don't know if it's valuable to actually show people how to show the bands. I feel like it is, but the wrapper wasn't then behaving the way that I was expecting. So it's a little bit weird to have a separate file that's being asked for here, because normally those two definitions are together. Doesn't matter. We're going to treat it as if that's what you have to do, if that's what you want to do. And people can sort it out later if they're running a local installation. Anyway, so you get the cytogenetic banding patterns on top of the ideograms. And the nice thing about this is that now you've removed all that variation in coloring of the chromosomes, which was interfering with the salience of the colors of the blue and the red colors that we are using. We're going to limit finally close to the end, we're going to limit the image to just 8 chromosomes by using the limit filter chromosomes field. And that gives us this. And then we're finally going to, sorry, this slide is out of order. We're going to remove intrachromosomal links and make all links thicker with some more rules, basically removing data that is presumably not interesting to us to only leave the data that is interesting to us in the figure without changing the data files at all. And you will get that, and that's the final image. And I feel like it's okay if I don't get this far. It's not that important. It's okay if I don't get to the karyotype, to the cytogenetic bands. This is basically extra dessert, things that are filling in maybe some gaps in knowledge that may be useful. I kind of feel like spending some time on rules is good. I'm going to see where we are at slide 94 when we take questions to figure out whether I need to slow down or speed up a little bit. But I do feel like getting to this area where we were drawing that scatter plot with the square rectangles, with the square glyphs, that was an important point that I would definitely want to make it this far. Then finally, in the last 10 minutes or so, or maybe in the last 20 minutes, and I'll leave the last 10 minutes for questions. I'm going to look at the local configuration. So I'm going to download the configuration archive for the last image. I'm going to show people that it's a tarball. If you unpack it, you get a conf and a data directory. Inside these directories, you get data, the same data that you've uploaded. You get the configuration files, which are used to create that image. I'm going to look at the fact that if you go into this directory and if you have Circos installed, you just run it, pointing to the configuration file that Galaxy gave you, and it just generates the exact same image that you made in Galaxy. You can look at the circos.conf file, and I will quickly go through it to show people a flavor of what the internals look like, specifically the links file where you define the file, the radius, the color, and how the rules are implemented as these blocks so that it clicks into people's heads that it's really just a decision chain and we're testing a condition and then we're applying some actions to points that match the condition. And then the data conf, which is where the 2D data tracks are. Here's our histogram. And here's the condition that tests whether the value is bigger than 20. This is the count of the links. And if it is, then the fill color becomes black. And that is the end of my slide deck so far. There's a lot of talking. Did any questions? Was everybody able to roughly follow it?
Yes, we could. We could.
Okay.
I think it's
Okay.
easy to follow.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
I went through the slide deck earlier this morning and followed it easily. So yeah.
Okay, so here I've decided I'm using magenta boxes to highlight the fields I want people to look at, because green is already used, and I was using red before and that seemed a little too angry as a color. So I don't know, how do people feel about magenta? Is that okay?
Magenta's nice.
Okay, great. Okay, good. We're just gonna stick with magenta. It's happy enough. I will later, as soon as we get off this call, I'm going to export the history, and Christina and Gareth, I will email you the. Actually, I've already done it, haven't I? I've already done it. Yes, I did it when you guys were showing me how to do it. So if you search for Circos, you'll see my history already exported, named Circos Workshop. So you can load it up, and I don't think I'm going to change anything to it. Just, I mean, unless you feel like that there's a section where that really is weird and doesn't work, I can change it. But if not, I'm gonna say that that's what it is, so that there's no surprises for anybody of things changing between now and the day of the workshop.
Thank you, Martin. I can confirm I can see it in Galaxy Australia. What I may do is I'll run through it myself, and if you're okay, I may make some cosmetic changes to the file names, just because I still have a concern that that long URL won't necessarily wrap well on everyone's screen. And you,
Oh, like for example, MKWeb, Galaxy Data, Karyotype, this, right?
yes, yeah. So depending on your screen size, for example, on my laptop last night, it was maxing out somewhere around Galaxy/data.
Well, how convenient is that? That's
Yeah.
okay, right.
So therefore, I was having to double check, was it item number 2, etc.
Okay.
So I might just edit them down to
No,
carry
that's totally fine. As long as right, and that's just a change in how the file name is displayed. If it doesn't change anything, no problem.
Yeah.
I will make that point to students when they're looking at the history file, that there's a URL base string in this file name that they may not see, but they will see the proper file name. Okay.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
should be
and
that should be a small change for them to adapt to.
That's standard Galaxy stuff. You know, if someone asks, we'll jump in on the discussion board, show them how to find that material in the metadata in Galaxy. But I think in the interest of 3 hours, we'll keep it simple.
That sounds good. Okay.
I have a couple of questions, if I may.
Yep.
Sorry for coming in late and to answer these already. So on one of the ones, I guess, is any of these analyses, any of these stages particularly slow when the participants are going to be sitting around waiting? Or
no, because all of the right. Initially the images take roughly the same amount of time to draw, actually. What happens for me when I was using Galaxy is when I go to rerun the job towards the end, as I had more history items, that step took a little bit longer. So it went from 2 seconds to 10 seconds to 15 seconds for me to see the web form.
Yeah, that's trivial.
That's small.
Yeah.
Because the history has been pre-processed or pre-analyzed, whatever the lingo is for Galaxy, people won't actually need to execute any of these jobs to see the images unless they want to. And the only reason why they would want to is because they're confident enough and they want to change a few values and see what happens.
I can imagine them wanting to.
Okay, so they can, and it takes about 10 seconds in the queue for me, and then, or 10 to 15 seconds in the queue and 10 to 15 seconds to run the job. So it's snappy-ish.
Yeah.
So I've set it up so that the jobs get distributed to our training queue, so that we can run about 30 to 35 jobs concurrently. So and they'll take about 30 seconds to run each.
Okay, great. Okay, the memory footprint, because the data files are really small, the memory footprint is really low. I think locally the the last image takes, because of the copy number scatter plot, which has about 3,000 points, and then we draw this 3 times. Locally, my job takes about 20 seconds to run. So people shouldn't be too inconvenienced. At the same time, if it does take a long time, well, you know, it's okay because they can still progress with the tutorial. So we should be okay, I feel. But everything is, Michael, everything has been pre-processed, and nothing takes too long to draw.
All good.
Okay.
I have another question. Can I?
Yeah.
So if people want to run these instructions on their own downloaded Circos, I know you said you didn't want to talk about the differences. Will they work out the same? Will it all come out the same on their own?
Yes. So right.
Local install?
So if they download the latest version, which has been the latest version for about a year. Okay. Yeah. Well, and they download the config from Galaxy, they will get exactly the same image. Okay, and I talk about that towards the end, and then they can go and they can edit the config files and have access to some more features that the wrapper doesn't have. Who wrote the wrapper? Is that the Galaxy team as a whole makes these wrappers, or is there one individual who's responsible for individual wrappers?
So the Circos wrapper was written by somebody in Germany, Helena Rasch, her name is.
Okay.
And, but she's part of a Galaxy subgroup called the IUC, or the Intergalactic Utilities Commission, which is basically the people who write the standard wrappers for things. So yeah, it's a
okay,
it is a fairly well put together wrapper.
Okay, yeah, it is, and I would love to. I'm gonna get in touch with her, because there's just a couple of things that, if changed and or added, would make it so much better. And I think that the wrapper might have been written quite a while ago, and there's been certain new features added. So it would be really, I would love to contribute to it, actually, because I haven't used Galaxy. I didn't even know this wrapper existed.
Oh, cool.
And this is cool.
I can send you a link to the GitHub repo issues page, so you can just create an issue in GitHub and
oh, okay, that would be great. Please, if you could point me to where, because I know that when the wrapper failed, it took me to a bug reporting page, and my name was there and my email was there, which would be hilarious because I'd get this bug about something I never knew existed, about something I knew nothing about, but nobody's ever written. So presumably that nobody's ever encountered any bugs. So this is positive.
Yeah.
Okay. So, any other questions?
I know a couple of people do have meetings starting in a minute, so we'll have a few people dropping off. But
okay.
For the others that are here, there's time for some questions, or if you want to send them through to me afterwards if something comes up.
So Martin, I've just linked in the into the chat the URL for the issues page for the particular GitHub repo where your thing is.
Oh yeah, I see it. Thanks.
Cool. The code for that is in the code tab under tools. Circos.
Oh, so the IUC is a collection. What the Intergalactic Utilities Commission?
Yeah, it's the one. Yeah.
Okay, that's a lovely name. That is just a collection of all or a core set of wrappers, or
yeah. It's a core set of wrappers.
So Helena would be monitoring this, or
yes, Helena will definitely be monitoring this.
Okay,
and I can ping her about it anyway. So
okay,
there's a link to the actual code if you're interested. It's complicated.
I'm sure it is complicated. But I wonder, okay, I may not want to look at it before I finish all this other stuff. Okay.
Martin, can you
Yeah.
briefly? I'm not sure. Like, are you going to briefly talk about? I know, like, you're not familiar with the Galaxy wrapper for Circus, and in the Circus box here, there are a couple of tools available beside for the Circus. It's
Yes.
called, like, for example, Circus interval to tile.
Yes.
So, are you be able to briefly just talk about what is this about? Because I expecting like some of the students or like the attendees might, oh, we have all these features, but what are they used for?
Yes, I did. There's one part in my slides where I cover that, and I'm trying to find it now. Here, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. So I do talk about this link density track, which counts the number of links in a window and just reports a file that is suitable for a histogram track or any other 2D data track. And I can spend a little bit of time on this page. I'm going to monitor my usage of time and see whether I have the time to maybe mention a couple of other things.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
So I can also mention that these are described on the tools page on the Circus website, which, by the way, I think at the before the workshop, I show a screenshot of it, and I tell people that they can get gain some familiarity about some of the back end stuff and some of the what is possible by looking at things like the tutorials, which basically
Yep.
walks you through the features, and then the tutorials has a list of the helper tools, and those helper tools are implemented in these. Some of them are implemented in these apps. Yeah.
Yeah, I can speak from my own experience. The first time I learned how to use the Circus plot in command line is that how to prepare the file format.
Right. So, right. That's a good point. So at the beginning of this somewhere, what I have a statement about, where is the statement? Statement here is that, yes, you can prepare the file. The files are, I talk about the data formats, which is really simple. It's basically like the dumbest bed format you can imagine. You know, chromosome start end, value, end of story. You can create that with Galaxy by, I presume that I think that there's lots of tools to manipulate files and move columns and do calculations on files and combine files and so on. That all of that is its own data munging process, which I don't want to get into because it will take away the time from talking about how to create the image. But
Correct,
that is a whole
Yep.
other process, and people can look into that. And if they are good at coding, they can just code it up because you're just moving columns around, or they can use Galaxy to help them reprocess or extract the columns from a data file, such as an alignment file or a bed file, and just feed it into Circus.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
There are some because the wrapper doesn't support the use of these parameters. Like if you're looking at the screen right now, actually, this is better because I'm not going to use the gene file. Like the size rank parameter, you can have these optional parameters which assign values to whatever name you like, such as size rank. You can then use this parameter in your rules to determine what to do with this data point. However, because the wrapper doesn't support making a call to check what the parameter value is,
Yep.
I'm not using this. And I am thinking that I might want to actually even remove it from this slide, because since I'm not using it, I don't want to pollute people's brains with things that aren't going to be used. I don't even want to mention the fact that the wrapper doesn't support this, because with every little new bit of information, they get overloaded, right? And there's nothing they can do with this new information because it's not supported. So I'm going to comb through these slides again and just remove anything that introduces doubt in their mind about what the differences are, and only towards the end mention that yes, there are differences, and yes, you can learn about them, and no, this is not the right time to do it because we're looking at the Circos,
Correct.
the core functionality. But okay, good point. I'll make that.
Can you also add a label on the track by saying that, because I tried it on the command line, but
no, right.
Okay.
So a label like a title, this track is CNV, this track is this. No, that is, I leave that to you to do in something like Photoshop or Illustrator.
I see.
Once you bring the image in. And the reason for that is, well, laying out text in a nice way is difficult, and you never do it as well as people do it by hand. And the idea is that once you have created your image for publication and you've tweaked things and you've placed things just the way they are, it doesn't take that long to drop in the text yourself. Yes, it's a bit of an excuse on my part for not programming that feature in.
No, it's okay. Thank you. And
but yeah,
supporting
I know. I mean, like, right?
asking me for like, okay, can you add the label to the track, and then I can use your word and show them this record.
Yeah, that's right. So I can get angry emails about why is this feature not implemented, because I'm also the only developer and I'm also the trader. So I have to I bear all responsibility. I can't,
No, it's fine, because like
pass this off to anybody else.
Yeah, some people ask me, oh, can you add the label between the tracks where the space?
I know. There's people ask labels tracks, labels on axes for in tracks.
Yep.
Generally, lots of text.
Yep.
Manipulation and drawing features. Yes, they are missing.
I just need to confirm that. That's all.
Point well taken. Won't be able to sleep tonight. No problem.
Oh, hi, I have a question.
Yes.
Will this be some people's first time to see Galaxy? Because I'm wondering if it's worth sending them some pre-reading before they come to the workshop. There's like a short intro to Galaxy that I think Christina's group created. So whether they could have a look at that just to familiarize themselves with what Galaxy looks like.
Yep, in the workshop description, we do say that you need to have familiarity with Galaxy. So perhaps if I send around we've done that intro to Galaxy Australia video and maybe even the workshop that they could step through, but hopefully there won't be anyone on Monday who has not used Galaxy before.
Okay.
But yeah, I can send around. Should I be sending around that tutorial, the Galaxy Training Network tutorial that I sent to facilitators, do you think? Should that go to the public first, or it's too much?
You mean the Circos one?
Yes.
I would say no, because it asks people to understand a lot of things. And in some way, we're also asking them to understand a lot of things. Yes, if they go through that tutorial entirely, all the way from the beginning to the end, they will learn a ton and they'll be more ready for this. But if they just kind of skim it and to get prepared, what we're doing is we're doing it in quite a different way. And I'm worried about confusing people by using a different tone for the tutorial, because every instructor has their own way of teaching, and if they now have to deal with two tutorials written by two different people, they may wind up being more confused than not. So I think that the point about whether people know Galaxy is a good one. What I can do is, because everybody will be importing my history, I will have a slide of how to do that. I will have a slide that helps them navigate the items in the history and what buttons to push. And really, they can quite nicely just sit back, scroll through the web form without clicking anything or without running anything, and just kind of understand how things are put together without really worried about how Galaxy works. I feel the only thing they need to do is they need to understand that there's a bunch of snapshots of configurations and there's some images they can look at, and then they can dig into how those are stacked and related later. So I think we can accommodate people who've never seen Galaxy reasonably easily. It's just that they have to understand that because we're going through some material, they're not going to be able to experiment and point and click and break things and then take some time to figure out what they broke, you know, in that kind of hands-on way, because we've got a bunch of different background levels to accommodate. So as long as they're happy with that, I think we're okay. But presumably if there is somebody who's having a hard time locally, they can be helped by the facilitators, right? And if there is a problem, if you know, if there's some catastrophe in one room, I don't know what it would be, but let's say there is, drop it into the Google Doc, and then Christina can let me know, and then we can always take 5 minutes as people regroup, right?
Yep,
I mean,
I spy on all the rooms constantly, so I'll keep an eye out to see if anything's happening.
Okay.
Fire drill or anything.
Okay. I mean, I defer to your experience in running these things. I'm you know, I'm flexible. Like I said, I'll do whatever you tell me to do.
All right, that's wonderful. And so if
sorry, can I ask a lot of questions, Martin?
Yes.
So is there a practice, sorry, Christina, is there a practice saying that like what kind of data should make in what plot?
Yeah. There's no right answer to that, but there's a bunch of wrong answers to it. So I think that I should mention one of the things at the beginning when I'm going through the examples of circus plots in the literature, is that the genome is very large and certain features are very small, and they're smaller than a pixel. They're even genes are smaller than a pixel, so things don't show up well if you insist on drawing them to scale. And so you have to not as much worry about what plot you're going to choose, but rather how big will this feature be in my final figure, and will it be big enough to notice? Will it be big enough to see? If so, will it be big enough to notice and stand out from other features? So I'll make a comment about that. People like there are lots of Manhattan plots of copy number values. They like scatter plots and that. I guess if you use a histogram for copy number values, people might feel it's a little bit unintuitive because I've seen all these scatter plots. But that being said, again, depending on what the window is for the data point, you're not going to draw 3 million values because they're just going to overlap each other. So I will take some time talking about data occlusion, the size of the glyph, because the scatter plot glyphs that I've used here, you know, they're the size of the point on the scale of the genome is like 20 megs. So it's a giant data point, and it covers up 20 megs. So if I have a value every 100 bases, I'm going to have thousands of data points right on top of each other. So I will make people sensitive to this problem, and it'll be up to them of how to solve it, whether they want to aggregate the data, they want to show standard deviation, they want to show outliers, whether they want to add transparency to the point so that the ink builds up where the data is really rich, although there's a limit to how much you could mitigate occlusion by. But that's a good point, and I will make some. I will comment on that on a slide. But I feel like these are important points, and they deserve attention, like in a part 2. If we had another 3 hours, you know, then we could tweak things and look at these very specific cases where I've got a lot of data. You know, how do I approach it with this specific data set in mind? I picked very general data sets that aren't of interest to anybody anymore. I mean, segmental duplications, right? Whatever. But they're just links. It's just relationships. They could be alignments. They could be anything. And people might be thinking about their own data set. And so Christine, maybe we could somehow encourage them to ask those kinds of questions. Well, I have this particular data set. How would you suggest I approach it? Which is difficult to answer without seeing the data set, but maybe I could give some tips. There's lots of times what happens is people will ask, I have copy number values, how do I draw it? You know, well, copy number, that doesn't mean anything. That means you have a large number of points. How do I draw a large number of points? Or what does your data show? What are you trying to communicate? Are you trying to explore the data? So all those questions are important as you're building up the image. And by people asking very general questions, they kind of not aware of the very specific questions that they should be asking themselves before they ask that of other people. Okay.
Well, if you can find a lazy 3 hours, we're always here for a part B.
Oh, really?
In fact, Michael Charleston, who's on the call, did a two-part kind of review on phylogenetic trees, and we did the standard presentation and overview as part A, and then invited people to contact Michael with their particular research-based questions about, okay, how does this apply to me and my data? And then did a follow-up kind of more of an informal Q&A session where Mike then covered off what that might look like.
Okay. Well, that might look like that. So, I mean, I don't even need to be there, right? I could run a part 2 from Vancouver, right?
Yep. We certainly could make it happen.
Okay. All right. Well, that's absolutely not out of the question at all. Although I do prefer to be on location. It's way more fun.
Yes.
Great.
All right. We can talk about that offline anyway. So in terms of the next steps, we've gone a bit over time now. I think people are probably getting edgy to wrap up. Can I say that we'll leave the slides with you, Martin, for another few hours, and then we'll send them around to the facilitators so they can have a scroll through? Or?
Yes, I will finish them in the next couple of hours, and I'll send you a version which will be close to the final version. I will probably tweak things the day before, but it'll be minor, and it won't surprise anybody, just sizing and things like that.
Okay. And so given the discussion we had right at the start today, can I confirm that we won't throw over to facilitators in the rooms to do any sort of leading of hands-on? That really you'll say, this is where we've got to take a few minutes to work in your rooms, but we won't be calling on facilitators to lead any discussions. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I think so. Do you think that being said, do you think that it's worth, so we have this idea that we're going to be fielding urgent questions at any time that they come up, and then we will leave 2 periods for questions that have accumulated 10 minutes each or 5 minutes each for this set of questions. Should we have a planned pause like every 10 minutes for a minute for the local rooms to catch up and for facilitators to regain control? Or is that too much planning?
I think the facilitators will often step up and say in the chat box, we need some more time. So if that is flagged with us, I can say to you,
okay, great.
We need to pause.
I will ask, okay. So please do that because it's going to be really hard for me. I'm a naturally fast talker, so I'm going to have to slow myself down. And you'll be sitting next to me and you'll just tell me slow down. And I'm aware of the fact that I'm speaking fast to everybody here, but this is a different setting. But I won't know how quickly people are working on their keyboards at all. So it's going to require that throttling.
Yes. Yeah.
Active throttling by people, and just add as many exclamation marks after you say slow down to tell me how much slower you want me to go, so that the pace is good.
Yep. And those pauses can then be a moment for you to go and look at what's happening on the discussion board as well to see how people are faring. If
how does the audio come through? Is it through a central speaker in the room, or is everybody plugged into their own? No, the audio comes from the central.
There will be one output for sound and vision of the presentation in each room. So depends on the facilities that each place has got.
Okay.
Hello, sorry, can I weigh in just for a sec? This is Niloufar from USQ. Because we were talking about pausing after like every few minutes, and something that I've seen is quite useful. Instead of pausing, it would be just good sometimes to just repeat what you did. Like if there's a step over there, and instead of you pausing there, maybe you could just go back and say, okay, so this was what we did. Because a lot of the times it's just someone just missed one step, and then if you just repeat what you did, everything's going to be great again. But yeah, not all the time, but instead of pausing, sometimes that could be useful.
Sure. So I can back up a couple of slides and say I'm backing up a couple of slides and highlight something, jump forward, and that'll be okay.
I think yes, or the same slide, if there's a practice in there and you think that people may need some time to do it, yeah, I guess it's been useful if you just say that, okay, so this is what we did. Or if you pause, then facilitators can help people to do it as well. I mean, either way should be fine.
I will consciously add pauses and recaps. Okay.
All right. It all sounds very good. It's going to be great on Monday. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Again, with thanks to you, Martin, for your time and attention. It's looking really fantastic. I know everyone else is excited about it too. So we'll end the meeting now. I'll be in touch with the facilitators and of course with you, Martin, as well. And we can cover off any last details we need by email,
I have a couple of questions about the webinar. Can you stay online for 2 minutes while everybody drops off?
Yep, sure thing. So we'll say goodbye to all the facilitators.
Thank you. I'll try to make it as easy for everybody as possible. I'm not here to make your life hard.
Bye-bye.
Bye.